your boy young I give him that thing. Pancho leg stand and punchy America. Banyi dwal pancho leg stand and punchy America. Banyi dwal ban walk on your leg kankaro watana watching. Oga leg gear pow leg panda with ya punchy America. Banye dwal ban chingatongo pandon kujwera baya cheka. Patu panda gear with ya be dwal venting. Stand and punchy America, Banyi dwal, pancha leg stand and punchy America, Banyi dwal, ban walk on your leg, kankaro watana watching, Oga leg gear pow leg, panda with ya punchy America, Banye dwal ban chingatongo pandon kujwera baya cheka, Patu panda gear what ya be dwal venting.
Thank you so much and welcome to Lagos State Media Beyond Boundaries. Our viewers, wherever you are tuning in, we are live now with Professor Taj Elkhazin, the professor who is so much into the issue of Nile water, is somebody who has worked for over 50 years in Sudan and currently in South Sudan. Professor Taj Elkhazin was one of the leading professors during the public consultation in Juba in regard to the dredging and the resumption of Jonglei Canal. They were there with some of our national experts, the like of Deng Majuk, and those who are in the Ministry of Water, and the like of Isaac Liabwel, and many more. And many South Sudanese across the globe, we followed them through the discussions, and we have seen what happened in the hall and how these people were actually trying to educate South Sudanese in general on what are the impact and the negative side and the positive side of such a project. And today, as Lagos State Media, we are so happy to host Professor Taj once again to discuss some of the resolutions which were made during public consultation meeting for 5 days. And also he will tell us his experience in Juba and also full contents of the position of our government when it comes to the Nile water issue. And we are so much into this because the Nile water is not a simple thing. It has been said several times that water is life. And if you still have doubts about that statement, just visit next door, Kenya. You will see how drought has really hit Kenya badly. And there is plenty of water in the other side of South Sudan and in Uganda. And that tells you that water is lifetime and generational resource that cannot be messed with no matter what. Professor Taj, we are happy to host you once again. And thank you so much for giving us your time as Lagos State Media. Today we'll give you a chance to give us your opening remark before we dive into our conversation of today. You're welcome, Professor.
Thank you very much for hosting me, and thank you very much for the excellent organization by sending me the 10 questions up front. I have been behind the issue of the Nile waters, the Horn of Africa and East Africa for the last 50 years of my life. the invitation to come to Juba was from the president himself, and I must raise my hat for the adequate funding and good organization that was done for the public consultations. And I raise my hat for the stand of the population, the citizens, who were being literally harassed, but they stood their grounds and we said, you are the government, we are the people, and I am on the side of the people. And I made probably about 30, 35 other meetings while I was there for 30 days. So I have a fairly concise and accurate sense of direction of where everyone is going. We managed to reveal a good number of documents. Some of them were actually very shameful to have been signed and agreed by South Sudan. They were made public and they are available in the public domain. Your invitation now, your kind invitation today is number 10. I have 9 YouTubes of previous invitations and previous interviews, and they are available in the public domain if anyone wants them. And I am ready for your questions. Thank you very much for hosting me.
Thank you so much, Professor Taj Elkhazin. We South Sudanese are always grateful for your support and your knowledge and your wisdom that you always feel selfless to share with your people. And you know, Professor, human beings are very delicate animals, and sometimes they tend to be selfish with their wisdom and their knowledge to share it with their fellow human being. But we are so much honored and privileged to have you. And we citizens also appreciated our president for inviting you to Juba to discuss in details what we started here earlier in the month of June, to discuss many things here online until you reach to the ground and see them, some of them by yourself. We'll dive into our conversation rather, Professor. Since you have been to Juba for closely 1 month and some few days, if I might not be wrong, and you have seen, you had several meetings with the government officials, also with non-private, that is non-governmental organizations, and you managed kindly to share your knowledge with the public, not only in Freedom Hall, you also went as far as visiting University of Juba under leadership of Professor John Kenya Porwat, and you also share your knowledge with them and with the student at large. Can you tell us, Professor, your experience in Juba for that period, and how you have seen Juba or South Sudan as a young nation, the directions we are taking as the country? As many people normally say it, a dancer will not know whether he or she is dancing well, but the outsider will be the right mirror to tell him or her the step he or she should take. You are the mirror to our nation, and you can also give us what are your views, what are your observations, and what have you experienced in Juba? Thank you, Professor.
Right. As I said during the consultations, before the consultations, and after the consultations, that I am as a South Sudanese as anyone who was sitting in the hall, and I am as much as of a South Sudanese as anyone listening to me now. So my platform is not that of the Khawaja, and my platform is not that of the external. I am very much into the country. I was sent to prison 11 times by Bashir and Hassan al-Turabi for my relationship with the people of South Sudan. So whatever I am saying is coming from intimate and interest-free angle. My general observation is that, and some of my friends did not like what I said, there is a disconnect there is a communication disconnect between the government and the people. That's quite serious. That's quite serious. The government is already a coalition of a number of small governments, small individual vice presidents, individual forces, and the country is working on that. They're working on it. However, as it stands today, there is a need for what we call a bus bar. There is a need for that connection to be much stronger. And that can only happen with citizens' awareness. And this is my second observation. I found that not for the lack of intelligence, but for the lack of information. There is quite a bit of a gap in citizens' awareness due to the gap in citizens' knowledge imparted to them. Let me give you a few examples before I close. The government of South Sudan, our government, as we speak, hasn't got a functional website. You just go and Google with the website and you get 404 error. Does not exist. The Ministry of Justice and Legal Affairs, where we go in to find what are our laws, doesn't have a website at all. The Ministry of Water Resources doesn't have a website. The Ministry of Environment and Forestry doesn't have a website. So the communication both ways or even one way is extremely poor. And this is an area where our government needs to work on it. They should not stand their grounds. We are right. We are the government. No, you are the government. We are the people. We put you there. Tomorrow we will put you out. The day will come for that kind of democracy. So that was my main observation that I would like to share, that the information and the connectedness and the care for the citizen. And that was very clear during the consultations when one of the vice presidents tried to intimidate us. We are the government, we are the people stood their grounds and literally told him, we are the people. So I think that's the most important reflection and message that I took away from my presence in Juba. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof, for being precise. And your observations are accurately correct, because as a young nation, there are a lot of challenges that are yet to be fixed. But Professor, let me add these questions as a follow-up question. After you observe all this, Professor, do you have hope that within the next 15 to 20 years, South Sudan will be at least at the ground table of showing something to the world in terms of leadership?
There are two kinds of states in the world. There is what we call a nation state, like Japan, like Portugal, like Bangladesh, where the population have a lot of commonalities other than the struggle, structural commonalities, language, religion, history. And then there is the state, but not a nation state. This is where you have a lot of ethnicities, actually a lot of nationalities under one political umbrella. And that's a very difficult situation. This is where we stand. If I am to count, I can probably count about 40, a little bit over 40 different ethnicities with different languages, with different history, with different customs of marriage, of burial, and whatever have you in South Sudan. So what is the bus bar? What is the connection between those? That's a very big question mark. I don't see that connection yet. Graham Thomas from Oxford wrote a book called Sudan, This is a Dream, before the separation of South Sudan. So we need actually to be very careful about the needs, the structural needs of a state that is not a nation state. So anybody who talks about a nation in South Sudan, are you talking about the Dinka nation, the Nuer nation, the Nangatom's nation, the Moro nation? All those are nations. They have different dances. Some of them have got different costumes. They are under this political umbrella. Regarding hope, there is no life without hope. I would say that humanity will perish without hope. It is hope that actually inspires people. It is hope by the Lord Jesus Christ, one man. And now today we have 3 billion Christians around the world, probably more. So, but hope, people cannot eat hope. And people cannot go to the bank and cash hope. Hope needs to be followed with will, and the will needs to be followed with action. And it is that action, national action, which is required. Thank you, sir.
Wow. Thank you so much, Professor. Without hope, humanity will perish. That is a very strong message. And as a young nation or South Sudan citizen, we believe in hope. During 21 years of struggle, South Sudanese were not having anything to showcase or to show to the world except their hope and determination. After we gain our independence, we are yet to redefine where those hope, determination, and self-sacrifices got lost between. If we regain them back, I think we will be in a position to show something to the world as a new nation. Thank you, Professor, for that. We move to question 2. You know, Professor, after your exercise of 5 days public consultation, conference, and other meetings which you and your committee did with the government officials, and then you left Juba. You submitted your reports or your finding to the office of president, of which you will tell us later on. And recently, we have seen on public domain government officials, especially the cabinet, council of ministers, passing their own resolution. And what happened, Professor, is changing of names. And you know, when Dr. Yak Machar said that South Sudan is just a direction, we need to rename our nation. Many South Sudanese rose up and said, our problem is not naming. Our issue is leadership. We don't have issue with the name. Our problem is leadership. And this is what happened. They changed name from dredging to cleaning and clearing of water in order to allow navigation, of which they said, and they did not even disclose what kind of products are they going to transport through river mean if we cannot even afford to clear our road or to construct our road. Professor, what are your reactions toward that resolution passed by the Council of Ministers extraordinary meeting? Thank you, Prof.
Right. Before I go in and answer your question, I want to add that South Sudan had to and still has to deal with what I call the absence of the common enemy. During the struggle years, there was a common enemy. There was the North. There were the Jalaba. There were the Arabs. There was Islam coming from the North. And that acted as a bond. There is no longer a common enemy. If there is an enemy, it is an enemy from within. And I think this needs to be well researched. How do we restructure the bondage between the citizens in the total absence of the common enemy now? The common enemy is no longer there. We can no longer talk about the Jalaba. We can no longer talk about South. They are gone. And let me now answer your question. And let me start by the issue of leadership. I invited General Obasanjo at the time when he was a free man in between the two presidencies. He was president when he was a general, and then he was elected. So I met him in Addis Ababa, and I invited him for lunch. And he's a giant. And as we were talking, I would say African leaders. Every time I said African leaders, he would look at me. And then I thought, what am I saying wrong? I mean, this, and he's 6'6". You don't want to meet him at the end of a road at all. And then he looked at me and he said, young man, look here, young man. In Africa, there are only rulers, there are no leaders. And that was the word of wisdom. There is a very big difference between a ruler and a leader. The leader listens to his people. The leader works for the interests of his people. The ruler wants to stay in the seat. So we need to be mindful of that, and we need to always be asking for leaders. Let me take you to the meeting. I have been chasing the text of the resolution of the meeting of Monday, October 17th, for almost one month now. Nobody could produce for me that written Council of Ministers resolution. One of the ministers, a cabinet minister, he asked me to listen to the radio. As a scholar, I don't take my information from the radio. I don't take it from the media. If I want to analyze a resolution, I need to see it and I will be able to analyze it. I contacted 4 cabinet ministers. Each one was passing me over to the other. And until as we speak now, I do not have the text of that meeting of the Council of Ministers. And the main reason why I don't have it is that the Council of Ministers doesn't have a website where automatically they log in the resolutions. In Canada, in Ottawa, if there is a Council of Ministers meeting by 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I can log in and I can get the exact text as was passed by the Council of Ministers. We need to attend to these communication issues. Why would a resolution of the Council of Ministers either be lost or be confidential or is not made available for a researcher? There is no reason whatsoever. The resolution is on behalf of the people. It is not the resolution. The resolution is not owned by the Council of Ministers. And there is a big difference between the two of them. So whatever I am telling you now is from what Michael McQuay said, and I wrote down exactly to the comma and to the letter what he said, what some friends volunteered to give me. And the gist of that resolution is that there is a total freeze on any activities until feasibility studies are done. So anyone who goes against that is going against the instructions of the president, and he has to bear the consequences. And certainly this was a very good decision. The other thing that came out of that resolution was the formation of a high-level committee headed by Dr. Barnabo Marial, the Minister of Presidential Affairs. I have not seen any action on that. I have not seen naming of members. I have not seen the working rules. I have not seen anything. So the resolution, although it was a victory for us because the resolution was essentially the passing of the recommendations of the public consultations. And for the first time, the voice of the people was actually heard loud and clear by the presidency. So there is quite a bit of smoke around those whole things. There is quite a bit of lack of clarity. If there has been a switch of terminology, well, we stand on guard against that. Because in science, there is no ambiguity. Dredging, and this is what the Egyptians wanted to do, dredging is to bring equipment and tamper with the bed and the dimensions of the river. And that is what the 2 drag lines are for. The 2 drag lines that are still lying in Bentiu now, the bucket has a reach of 12 meters. 12 meters. A 12 meters bucket can actually dig down 8 meters. Is that what we want? Is this the equipment that we want? I have the packing list. I have the bill of lading of that equipment. 21 trucks, 21 trucks, 12-meter length trailers, total load of over 900 tons. The equipment is not for the clearing of aquatic weeds. That equipment is for dredging. Dredging means siphoning out water from the Sud into the Nile into Egypt. Do we want to do that? Just free of charge? Simply because there is a hotel or there is a clinic or there are scholarships? We want to drain the water? And we will come to Jungule Canal later on during our discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Literally, since the resolutions of clearing and cleaning of waters, you try your level best to reach out to those ministers to see whether they can provide you with the content so that you can also do your own analysis and compare the resolutions with the recommendations from the public consultation. Unfortunately, you are still yet to be served with that document. In other words, it tells us either the government is trying to hide the resolution from the public because neither any of the media, including Lagos State media, we have not even seen the documents. But what we have seen is the passing of the resolutions, clearing and cleaning of water by the Council of Ministers through Radio's website or through Radio's Facebook page. And we are yet also to get the contents where the resolution was passed. Professor, these questions take me back to what you mentioned earlier and reminded us what took place on the 5th day of the public consultation. You stated very clearly during your conversation with the former president of Nigeria that there is difference between leaders and rulers. What African has now are rulers, and leaders are yet to come. On the 5th day, one of the vice president, especially the first vice president, stood up and stated clearly that we are the government and nobody can overturn any resolution passed by the Council of Ministers. And that statement up to now is still yet being comprehended by the citizen. What does that statement mean? Does it mean Council of Ministers is above the citizen voice? Does it mean the Council of Ministers is above the lawmakers, that is the parliament? Does it mean the Council of Ministers is the only body that can decide the fate of the Republic of South Sudan? We really need your wisdom on that, Professor. Thank you.
Let me backtrack to that day and let me backtrack to that incident. When that incident happened, with all due respect to the first vice president, I stood up and I walked away and I waved with my hand. Nobody could stop me. And a gallant woman, Dr. Salwa Jibril, she stood up. She not only stood up, but stood up tall and stood up brave, and she answered. And the content of her response was that we are here on the command and instructions of the president of the country, and we are here, we are the people. We did not budge. The people were very brave, and we went ahead and we concluded the consultations the way we wanted, in the manner we wanted, with the freedom that was given to us by the president. And I must allude and hats off to the president for convening the consultations. And I must bow in respect for the knowledge, for the patriotism of the national experts that were certainly a very big component and a major component in the recommendations that we tendered to the president. Let me, although I don't like going into politics, but for some reason, we had an appointment, the team, respected team, knowledgeable people. 7 times we were told that we are going to meet the president to deliver the report. It did not happen. Until we left, until I left, no one met with the president. 7 times. We will go and we will sit in the offices sometimes for 2 or 3 hours. And so for some reason, the meeting is frustrated. But we do not give hope. And meeting the president was not really personal. It does not add to you. It does not take away from you. It was to see if he has got any questions, if he has got any concerns, if he have got any black holes in his understanding of the situation. We wanted to fill those. There was no, we were not asking for money. We were not asking for vehicles. We were not asking for positions. We were all academicians. We wanted to interact with a man who actually stood on the side of his people. And I wait for you to go into question 3 because it's a very important question that we need to address. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor. It's very unfortunate that you did not hand over the report personally with your team to the president so that we can also explain to him the challenges that you went through for 5 days. And that is what the politics is. Thank you for that. Question 3, this changing of terms and terminologies, Professor, sometimes it gives people 2 options. Those who don't have clear knowledge of those 2 or 3 or 5 terminologies seem to be confused with the one terminology. And those people who assume to might be having adequate knowledge of those terms sometimes assume to be clever enough to play around with the mind of those who don't have knowledge. And even the Bible acknowledges that if my people don't have knowledge, they will perish for the lack of knowledge. Yeah. Kindly, Professor, can you elaborate to us what is the difference between cleaning, and the dredging? Although you mentioned it in several interviews, including our first interview with you, we really need you to emphasize it more because the government has changed the terms from dredging to cleaning and clearing. Thank you, Prof.
Sure. There are 2 scenarios. Either the government is honest and transparent with us, and that's great, or the government is playing games. It will be intelligent of us to tell them, no, we don't think that you are playing games. We believe you. We believe you. And corner them and pressure them so that they go with the right thing, although they meant it to be a camouflage. What came out, what I got from that resolution on the 17th of October is that it was clearing of the waterways. Once you have the word W-A-Y-S, ways, then it is transport. And the simple example is motorway, highway, taking you from A to B. That is that's out of the Oxford Dictionary. There is no doubt about it. So if the resolutions of October the 17th were for waterways, for communication, for river transport, for moving of our products from the mines, extractive industry that needs transportation, then that's fine. But that's a different ball game from siphoning out water from our wetlands, from our water, from our rights into the Nile for the interest of another nation. The second one goes into high treason. It goes straight into high treason. So at this juncture, until I cite a copy, an authentic copy of the resolution for analysis, I tend to believe what Brother Michael McQuay said, and I tend to believe what came out in the media, although that's not material for scientific analysis. And I would like to once more differentiate between dredging, clearing, and cleaning. Dredging is when you remove solid material from the bed and the sides of a waterway or a water conduit with the objective of adding more discharge, adding more quantity of water to that specific tributary or that specific river. That's what dredging is about. And this takes me back to the equipment that came from Egypt and the bucket that has 12 meters reach. That cannot be for clearing and cleaning. Clearing and cleaning has been done in the waterways in South Sudan since 1913. And let me tell you why 1913. The River Transport Corporation, the central one before separation, before 2011, was established in 1912 and it became operational in 1913. Before that, Baker, the British explorer, Baker tried twice to go into the Nile. The first time he had to come back. He had 1,000 soldiers. And as soon as he left rank, he was being faced with the aquatic weeds. So they started cutting and then they got tired. After 1 month, they got tired. So he came back to Khartoum. And in December, this was in January or March, in December of 1870, he went back, this time with a larger army and more equipment. And he started cutting the aquatic weeds into smaller pieces and allowing them to float away from the Nile. Only then he was able to reach Malakal. So aquatic weeds are not new to the Nile. From day one, from the first day that Baker stepped into the Nile, aquatic weeds were there, and they shall be there. So every year, since 2013, the River Transport Corporation was clearing aquatic weeds every year for 100 years. That's not strange to us. We have got no issue with that. This requires certain equipment that is not there now. It requires knowledge that is not there now. It requires security that is not there now. I talked to the commander of the engineering corps of the South Sudan People's Defense Forces, our national army, the top general in charge of the engineering corps. They have the equipment and they have the knowledge. No one called them. No one called them to come and do clearing. There are 37 barges that have sunk into the waterways. We can remove them with local contractors. In any country around the world, when there is contracting in areas and domains that relate to the national security, the security organs of the country have got to be there, watching, supervising, making sure that nobody tampers with the rights of the country. We need to do that. I want to see our engineering corps out there leading. I want to see our national security out there observing. And I want to build the capacity of our local contractors so that the work in security sensitive areas is done by local contractors and not by foreign contractors who have got their allegiance with somebody else. Now, let me tell you the difference between dredging, clearing, and cleaning. Clearing and cleaning are just two different terms for the same thing. It is removing obstacles. It is not siphoning out water. It is not tampering with the cross-section of the river. It is not draining water from A to B, from Naam into Lake No. Every drop of water that comes into Lake No goes into the main Nile. That's it. As we speak, the 260 kilometers of the canal that have been dug have broken the banks in three places. 2 places along the run and 1 place at the northern end. So as we speak, there is water going into the main Nile from our water in the Sud. That's the serious issue. That's a serious issue. If I were a member of the government, I would not sleep at night. So clearing and cleaning is to remove obstacles that are alien, obstacles that are not part of the river. It is not a tree on the far side. It is not a natural depth. And to add to that, for 100 years, 1912 to 2011, all the vessels of the River Transport Corporation had a draft of 4 feet. That's it. 4 feet, 120 centimeters. Anyone who wants to go and clear or do whatever he wants to the depth of 4 feet, be my guest. I will go and help them. So what we need to define first and foremost, what is the objective? Is the objective communication and river transport? That's a certain game ball. If the objective is to siphon out our water while we are looking and give it to a third country, that's a different story. And the devil is in the details. Part of the resolution, as I understood it, is the formation of a high-level committee headed by Barnaba Marial. Has it been formed? Who are the members? Did they meet? What is their mandate? All that are big questions that need to be answered. And probably a final input. The objective will determine who is leading or which organization is leading. If we are talking about waterways, removing aquatic weeds so that we have an additional mode of transport in South Sudan, then it is the Minister of Transport and Roads. They will be leading. We are not going to need any extensive economic evaluation or social evaluation or socio-economic evaluation, nothing of that, because we are clearing aquatic weeds and we want to put vessels at a draft of 120 centimeters, and we have been doing that for 100 years. So what is the big deal? But if we are going to tamper with the ecology, if they are going to tamper with the environment, then the Ministry of Environment will come into play. So the objectives of this commission or committee and the details of the resolution, what is to be done, will determine the downstream, will determine what we are supposed to do, and we get prepared for that. Dredging is certainly tampering with the cross-section of the river, tampering with the flow per second, and tampering with the quantity of water that leave the Sud, which will be detrimental. If you look at the map, a scientific map, there is a place called the Green Belt. And the Green Belt is Western Equatoria and Northern Uganda. You never hear of a drought in Western Equatoria. You never hear of a famine in Western Equatoria. And people wonder what is the reason. The reason is the evaporation of water from the Sudlands, 70,000 square kilometers, and then the northern winds carry the moist clouds into Western Equatoria, and it falls as rain there. Dry the Sud, you dry Western Equatoria. Do we want that? The Moro can take us to court. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor, for clarification on those two terminologies. At least now our viewers And those who will listen to this interview afterward will be in a clear position to differentiate between the two, and they will no longer be confused by those who might be driving at the foreign interest in our nation. And that thing brought us to question 4 and question 5, Professor. Are there negative impact of clearing and cleaning of waterways? And if yes, or if no, can this clearing and cleaning be done without feasibility studies? Thank you, Prof.
I always tell my students and my family that if you want to go and buy a hamburger, you need to do a feasibility study. From where is the meat coming? Who is cooking it? Uh, what is with the patty? What is with the meat? How much does it cost? That's a feasibility study, so that I decide if I'm to go to this hamburger place or that hamburger place. That is at that is for something that costs $2 or $3. What about something that relates to the life and livelihood of the people? So to answer your question in a nutshell, everything needs a feasibility study. And there is a misconception about feasibility studies. People talk about socio-economic. These are only two. There are 11. If tomorrow we want to touch the Nile waters, there are 11 indicators, 11 feasibility studies that need to be done. And all of them are important. And they are at the end, they are there at the end of the recommendations that we tender to His Excellency the President. So, and I think this is the most important part of your question. So yes, there is need for a feasibility study, but a feasibility study by who and for what objective? If we are talking about siphoning water into Egypt, then it is one ministry. If we are talking about waterways, it is another ministry. If we are talking about tourism, it is another ministry. If we are talking about the livelihood of wildlife, it is another ministry. If we're talking about agriculture and food security, we're talking about Josephine Lago and another ministry. So we have to make the political decision first. What do we want to do? And I'm asking the question in the open air, and I hope to get an answer. What do we want to do? Openly and clearly, for what reason? No one can take me for a ride. No one can take the people for a ride. The fact that people don't have the facts does not mean that they don't know. The people know. And the support that we got from the citizens shows their interest in their young nation. So I am making a pledge, I am making an appeal to His Excellency the President and the ministers and the vice presidents for clarity. What do you want to do? Put it on the table for discussion with us. If there is nothing to hide, there is nothing to fear. If there is nothing to hide, there is nothing to fear. We are here to help. We are here to analyze. We are here to help you create roadmaps. We are here for the checks and balances. We are the people. We are the people. And the people are in charge in any democracy, are in charge of the checks and balances. The president cannot do what he wants. The vice president cannot do what he wants. They are there because the people are there. If we remove the 11,000 people, they will have to go home. So I think that's the first step, and that's the first call, and the louder call I wish to make through your venue, that for heaven's sake, Mr. President, for heaven's sake, government, tell us in clear terms and in written words, what do you want to do? And open it for discussion. Give us a chance to put our views in. I don't want to jump the gun and say that the government is playing games. I want to talk to them in good faith, and I want them to talk to us, we the people, to talk to us in good faith. Because there is no way that they can cheat us. Absolutely no way. There is so much knowledge and there is so much care from a good number of people like myself. We cannot be taken for a ride. And we shall not allow that the people are taken for a ride. And to conclude, there are donors, there are good countries who are willing to fully fund the feasibility studies. $1 million, $2 million, $3 million. It's a lot of money. It's not peanuts. There are donors. I am now working with donors in an area like that. Focus. They want to see where they can help. People are tired of pouring money and nothing happens. This specific donor said enough is enough. Professor Elkhazin, please give us a policy document. What do we do and where do we go? And a lot of donors are doing that. A lot of donors are stepping back now and saying, well, we have got taxpayers who are asking us, where does the money go? So from now on, it will be evidence-based and it will be results-oriented investment. Nobody is going to give money here and there and it disappears into thin air. And we have got to be careful about that. I mean, all the donors are stepping back, and someone told me there is compassion fatigue, not donor fatigue. People don't care. Someone told me that look at Joe Biden. When did he speak about South Sudan? Look at England. Look at Macron. When did they speak about South Sudan? We have got to read. We have got to read the writing on the board. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you so much, Prof. This statement remind me what one of my colleagues told me, an elderly man in church last Sunday. He said, while he's too busy with a lot of issues, if you don't know how to prioritize your priorities, then the world will perceive you like you don't have knowledge.
Yeah.
It is true that South Sudan need to ask themselves, what do we want to do with the Nile water first?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is it important to do clearing and cleaning? Yes. For what purposes? And thereafter, once they answer those questions, they will be in a position to engage with the expert like you and other many experts outside there. And if it is about funding, then you experts, you always have your network. You cannot be an expert for nothing. You are expert simply because you have done a lot of things in that particular field, and you know many donors, and many donors also know who you are, and whatever projects that you may invite them for, they will be gladly and happily support that project. It's a very good call and very loud call and question. By the way, what do we want to do? And thank you for that. Professor, we'll move to question number 6. You said earlier, anything that you need to do in your life, you must have feasibility study. Whether you want to buy a clothes, look at the quality. If you want to buy a food, look at the ingredients and the components that compose and produce that food. And look at the health wide. If you eat that food, will you be okay with it or not? These are feasibilities. And that's the takeaway to all of us, the viewers, and even the Lagos State media from you, Professor. Thank you for that. The resolutions which you pass and submit them to the government of South Sudan in regard to the cleaning, dredging, and the clearing, and whatever thing that's surrounding the Nile water, including many numerous documents which you discovered. One of the documents, we even shared it on our wall as Lagos State media, that the Egyptian government established the Ministry of Water in South Sudan.
Yeah.
It was so shameful to the citizens of South Sudan and even to some of the government officials. And the reason was simple. Our government officials, they decided to deal with the foreign interests individually, not as a collective nation. And that's where many documents were surprised, even to the president himself. Would you mind to share some of maybe few of those resolutions to the public, Professor? What were those resolutions which you consolidate during the public consultation and you submitted to the government of South Sudan? Thank you, Prof.
Sure. Let me single out one loud call that we put in the recommendations, a wake-up call. And that's, we exposed and documented what will happen if people tamper with their water resources. And we concluded that water security is part of the national security of any country. And we gave examples. In my presentations, I gave the example of the Aral Sea. This was a sea, it was not just a lake. It dried out. Now it is called Aral Kum Desert. The sea has turned into a desert because of the mismanagement. This is around the Caucasus, the southern parts of Eastern Europe. But close to us, not very far, 1 hour's flight, is Lake Chad. If you Google Lake Chad, you will find a lot about it. One of them, you will find a square where the satellites were taking pictures of the surface area of Lake Chad. In 1964, it was a certain size, massive. In 2010, 2011, it shrunk down to only 5% of its surface area. 95% of Lake Chad disappeared. If you are following COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh, the president of Brazil stood up and said he was going to protect the Amazon. The Amazon. I mean, these were the largest wetlands in the world. If the temperature is not kept at 1.5 degrees rise, the Amazon will disappear. Not the Sud. It is probably 2 or 3 times the Sud. It's going to disappear. Greenland will melt. The permafrost, the solid ice lands in North Russia and North Canada are going to melt. What are the consequences? So we are up against a global issue rather than just a localized issue. And although I don't like to go into politics, but where do we seek cooperation? Why don't we seek cooperation with Ethiopia? Where if we look at the Sobat River, the Sobat drains 15 billion cubic meters of water into the Nile. That's the discharge per year. It is made up of the Baro and the Pibor. The Pibor is ours. The Baro is coming from Ethiopia, from the highlands of Ethiopia. If we put a dam on the Baro River in the highlands where there is rocks, you cannot build a dam in sandy soil or clay soil. Otherwise, you have to do piles and go down 100 meters. That's very expensive. Nobody will do that. So we cross the border. They are all black Africans. I mean, the light color are in the north, but once you go into the SWMPR, Southern Nation Nationalities and People Republics, there are 16 pure black African nationalities there. This is where the bar is coming from. Let us go there, let us build a dam. We can generate about 250 to 300 megawatt of electricity, enough for the entire Eastern Nile and for the populations in Ethiopia. And we can, if we put a dam, we can save 12 billion cubic meters of water. We can irrigate all Jungule plains and be the granary for South Sudan. We have got to think strategic. We have got to get out of the traditional, outdated alliances that are not really giving us much and probably ripping us of our sovereignty. Having said that, the recommendations alluded to that. And then the recommendations suggested very strongly building the institutional capacity building of what we call the line ministries. The line ministries for water are the Ministry of Water Resources and Irrigation, the Ministry of Environment, the Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security, the Ministry of Justice and Constitutional Affairs, because all the laws are there and they are the custodians of the laws, the Ministry of Transport and Roads, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, because they are the ones who are facing the international community. So we have got 6 line ministries that are involved in water. I would like to see an interdisciplinary, interministry body that brings these together. And I would like to have a program that develops the institutional capacity, not the individual capacity, not workshops and training people how things are going. No. If there is no and if there are no vehicles, and if there are no offices, and if there are no technicians, you cannot do anything. You can have someone who is very eloquent talking all the time and there is no production. So this was the strongest recommendation that the government need to attend to the institutional capacity building of the ministries. And then we went into what we called homegrown solutions. Enough is enough. The Khawajas are sick and tired of us, and we are sick and tired of the Khawajas. What about us? Wherever I went, people would stand up and we'll go into what I call political narrative, personal glory political narrative. I did this, I did that, I killed it, I killed. Well, this was 10 years back, 11 years back now. What are we doing now? We cannot hang on to the struggle. The struggle has achieved its objective. What are we doing? What are we, the people, doing to advance ourselves? And as I said, there is donor fatigue. Nobody is giving us money. And now there is compassion fatigue. Not many people actually care. And if you read and talk to the embassies and talk to the foreign governments, how our government is literally ignoring the famine. I mean, the call for the famine, people are going to die. 7 million people are going to go hungry. You cannot ignore that. In any country, the state of emergency would have been declared, and all the resources of the country will be directed to save lives. Through you, I am making that appeal to the president. For heaven's sake, bar any official from traveling or boarding a plane. This is not the time. Direct all the resources to save lives of people who are going to die. Another recommendation was citizens awareness. We did citizens consultation and we recommended citizens awareness. One of the other recommendations was thinking outside the box. What do we do? What are the impediments to our development? How do we prioritize expenditure with the little money that we have? And it's not little really, it is a matter of management. When South Sudan separated in 2011, we went away with 350,000 barrels per day of oil. That was only 10 years back. As you and I speak now, it is only about 120,000 barrels per day. Less than 50%, about 1/3 of what we walked away with only 10 years back. Why? What do we need to do? The other thing, we talked about the environment, and we talked about the havoc that the oil companies are doing, especially in Unity State. The situation, the health situation is extremely bad. And now Unity State is behaving as if it is a country on its own. They can import equipment. If you look at the way bill of the equipment that came from Egypt, it was not consigned to the government of South Sudan. It was not consigned to the Ministry of Water Resources in South Sudan. It was not even consigned to the government of Jonglei State. It was consigned to the mission of the Ministry of Water Resources and Irrigation of Egypt in South Sudan. And I was told by a vice president, a current vice president, that the 10 states of South Sudan have got offices of the Ministry of Water Resources of Egypt in them, all 10 of them. And there were witnesses to that. So the recommendations, although they were diplomatic, they were clear. Priorities were made very clear. The report, if you have not seen it, I would advise you to get a copy or a soft copy. It is 158 pages. All the proceedings were there. It is a wake-up call. If I want to sum it up, it is a wake-up call that I hope all of us read it, take it in the positive and objective sense in which it was convened and in which it was written. But as they say, the devil is in the details. The fact that the president ordered the convening of the consultations, certainly a plus point. The fact that he convened an extraordinary meeting on the 17th of October, positive point. Forming a commission or a committee, positive point. Okay, what then? We want to see action. We want to see budgets. We want to see technical people. We want to see invitation of donors. And that rests on the desk of His Excellency the President. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor, for that information and giving us the insight of what transpired and what was the resolution during the public consultation. Because the citizens were waiting after the submission to the government, maybe the government will make a resolution public so that everyone can be in a position to read and comprehend what the resolutions were. Thank you so much. It moves us to question number 7, Prof. Indeed, you mentioned and you gave a very important message to our government to prioritize things that need to be done at the right time. And there are many things that our government is not questioning them. And it is true that the time of liberation is over. They have done their part, and now the nation needs other things more than a gun in order to move forward. But liberation itself needs only logistic and gun, and human, that is manpower. But the nation required more than those currently for it to stand at its feet and also to move forward with other nations. Thank you for that. In regard to the copy of the report, we will be glad to share it with us through email later on after our interview. The question number 7, Prof, is what are the priorities now or the resolutions, some of the points that you can ask the government of South Sudan to prioritize them, like 3 or 2, the points that you deem fit if government of South Sudan prioritize them now, then in the long run or in the near future, they can be in a better position to negotiate with the foreign interests when it comes to the Nile water. Thank you, Prof.
Right. The first recommendation will be to assert our sovereignty. And I must allude and show massive respect for the president when the Egyptian ambassador said that they are not inviting the Minister of Environment to the COP27 because she's against dredging. The president decided not to go, and he did not go. Great. I was so happy. I was so happy. We need to do more of that. We need to put and trim everyone to his size. There is no reason under the sun for an ambassador to go to the presidency. No reason. He should not even be allowed to step through the door. If he wants to communicate with government, he to the Minister of Foreign Affairs. That's what the whole world. 2002 or 2001 states that are members of the United Nations, that's what they do. That's what. Tell me, let me know where an ambassador just walks into and he meets with the presidency or with the Minister for Presidential Affairs. It does not happen. So we need to be firm about that. Now we are a sovereign state and that we respect ourselves and we respect our sovereignty. The other one is for our government and our institutions to start looking for homegrown solutions. We cannot be begging all our lives. We cannot be standing up and talking, and we expect others to do things for us. The others are sick and tired. I am very well introduced to that camp, and I know exactly what their sentiments are. They are drying up. Even compassion is drying up. And probably the third one is the respect for transparency. There is very little transparency. And the government needs to attend to developing the institutional capacity of the line ministries. If we consider water security, national security, then we need to give it the attention that we give to the army, to the police, and to the security organs. The people in those three are perishable. They will die. Others will come. The water is there. And the day we need it, we better have it there. And we should learn the lesson from Lake Chad. We should learn the lesson from the Aral. We should learn the lesson from the Amazon. The fact that we have water now and today in 2022 does not mean that we are going to have the same 10 or 15 or 20 years in the future. That's why we save. Even at the level of a beggar in the street, he will save a little bit of money for the unforeseen needs. So we need to be careful about our waters. We also need to be careful about the rights of people away from politics. The people in the Sud have been living with that for centuries. They're happy with it. Who are we to come and intervene and disturb the status quo? The word Bor, B-O-R, the capital of Yungule, the word Bor means flood in the language. So people since time immemorial, they have been living with floods. They look at the blessing side of the floods. They coexist with it. Why are we all of a sudden going into that? And then going around the world, none of the over 200 countries who are members of the United Nations have drained water into another country to control floods. It never happened before. Not in America, not in England, not in Bangladesh, not in Djibouti, nowhere. Nowhere did that happen. Why are we all of a sudden the odd one out of 200 who want to drain our waters and let it pass somewhere else to another country with detrimental consequences on us? I go back to high treason. Anyone who wants to deprive us of our water security, it is exactly like as if he's tampering with our body and national security. It is high treason. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor, for such call to the government of South Sudan. It is true indeed even a child, it comes a time when a child will no longer be bullied by his or her elder sisters or brothers. South Sudan should accept and man up that they are already adults and they cannot be bullied by any state in order to be submissive to them once it comes to the affairs of the nation. Thank you for that. Literally, Prof, when South Sudanese hear about or heard about the calling for the dredging, they all turn up in a large number advocating against this project. And one of the government officials called them social media criminals. To your observation in Juba, now you are speaking with a full knowledge and full atmosphere from Juba, and you even still feel what is going to happen for the next few years in Juba, considering your knowledge. Do you believe citizens were wrong to reject the idea of interference from the foreign government? Thank you.
Right. I don't like to go deep into politics, but I will stay at the border of that. I will stay at the border of academia and knowledge and see if I can avoid going into politics. The idea of Egypt considering the Nile its property, it started with the first visit of Baker. I think it was 1870. And then with another British person in 1904. So the conception, the dreaming, the development of Junkule Canal was a colonial project. It had one and only one objective: to drain about 4.8 billion cubic meters of water from the Sudan into the main Nile into Egypt. Google that and you will probably get 1,000 confirmations if someone does not believe what I am saying. And then in 1978, the construction started a huge machine called the Rupel. It was brought from Pakistan. It was built by Germany. It was brought from Pakistan, where it was dredging a canal. And it was operated by a consortium called Compagnie Construction d'Internationale. It was an Italian-French consortium. Okay. And they dug 260 kilometers out of about 340, 350. And then the Gallant Battalion 104 and the Gallant Battalion 105 were commanded to disable the machine. And they did. So this is part of the struggle. This is part of the history of the struggle. We cannot betray that. We should not betray that. They disabled the machine and they captured 5 Khawajas and took them to Ethiopia. Dr. Justin Yaj was represented the SPLM, SPLA in France. We worked together with others, and John Garang said, I am not going to release the 5 Khawajas until all the Caterpillar equipment is turned on to us, the SPLA. And the Khawajas did. I think there were about 50 pieces, D6s, D8s, D9s, motor, they were all turned over to the SPLA. Do you say that? Do we really want to betray that? I mean, those 2 battalions that were the first to go into real serious mutiny, and the gallant approach that they did, and the gain that was done by the SPLA. I mean, Yongarang was not stupid. Yongarang is not a killer. The SPLA are not killers. So there was a national objective in that. What was it? I leave the answer to that question to everyone to read the history and see why was that done, if there is any benefit. The other thing I wish to highlight here is that I am really baffled that now people they want us to prove that there is or there is not benefit to South Sudan from the canal. The question is lopsided, and I sent it back to them. This is my water. This is my country. This is my land. Why do I prove anything under the sun? Get the hell out of my land. Stop talking about it. So I am really against going into details. I am really against being defensive, because there is nothing defensive to talk about. I am not in a position of a defense. I am in the position of a right. I'm in a position of sovereignty. If what the Egyptian ambassador said, that he does not invite the Minister of Environment, if this happened anywhere in the world, he would have been declared persona non grata. He would have been given 72 hours to leave the country. Are we small? 11 million people? That's fine. Are we big? 650,000 square kilometers. Double the size of France. We have got to stand up tall. Let us imagine that we are in an Ugara and we are jumping up tall. So the minister who called us, and I'm one of them, criminals, is just he's a rude person. And he lacks diplomacy. He lacks respect for his fellow citizens and the wider population. This is not the kind of language that should come out from a leader, and this takes me to the reader and the rural. And then the fight is not a media fight, because this is not day-to-day politics. This is not party politics. These are the assets of the country. Do we deal with them this way or that way? That's an academic and knowledge-based approach. This is not a political-based approach. Probably a word for people who are, I don't like the term for or against. For why, against why. If we are against, we have been doing our job. This is the report. We have been doing our job. We sat there for 5 days and we produced that report. We said our word. I don't want someone to start, an insolent person, to stand up in front of a microphone and insult us. Give me something like that. Give me thought. Give me knowledge. Give me research, as we did. Fight me the same way I am trying to fight those who are working against the interest of South Sudan. Thank you.
Wow, that's powerful, Prof. Fight me the same way I'm trying to fight against those who want to deprive South Sudan from official and interest. Thank you so much. Yeah, Professor, we are left with the 2 questions to end our show. But before that, I will question my friends on who is controlling the technical team to let me know if we have some more questions from Clubhouse or even from comment section from our viewers. As we move on, we'll wait for them to let us know. Yeah, Prof, these questions, question 8, I want question 8 to be the last one. We'll move to question 10. Now, Prof, you have submitted your finding, and you have talked to government officials in South Sudan, and you have full knowledge about how Egypt always thinks and approach issues. Do you believe, Professor, that the government of South Sudan is willing and ready to defend, protect the Nile water from external interference? Thank you.
You are welcome. That's a tough question, and it takes me into the borderline of politics, which I am trying to avoid. But I will start by advising our government that for me as a citizen, to believe in their goodwill and to believe in their sound management of our waters, there are simple things that they need to do. And the first one, they need to open the file of the Nile Basin Initiative. The headquarters is in Entebbe in Uganda. Within the Nile Basin Initiative, there is an agreement called the Cooperative Framework Agreement. It is an agreement that is supposed to regulate the relationship between the 11 countries of the Nile Basin. Shamefully enough, the Nile, which is the longest river in the world, it hasn't got a lot of discharge, but it has length, and it has culture, it has history, it has archaeology. The Nubian heritage is unbelievable. The world is working up on that now. It hasn't got a cooperative framework agreement. In Canada, we have the International Joint Commission. The Rhine has its own. All the other, the Zambezi has its own. The Mississippi has its own. The Colorado has. There is no major river in the world that hasn't got a cooperative framework agreement, with the exception of the Nile. And why? Because the Egyptians do not want that. For your good self, for your colleagues, and for our listeners, I direct them to the website of the Nile Basin Initiative. And then they should Google the Cooperative Framework Agreement. It will come out in French and in English. And then I direct them to Article 14B, 1414B as in Bravo. The entire agreement has been accepted by all the countries. Eritrea doesn't have a lot of discharge into the Nile. It is less than 1%, and they don't want to be bothered with the Nile. They are not part of it, and they are now only observers, so they are not members. So I have got 10 countries. And you will find that out of those 10 countries, 6 countries have actually signed on the agreement, and 4 countries have ratified the agreement. There is a difference between the two. Signature is initial, ratification is final. And 4 of those 6 countries have ratified the agreement out of 11. So if we get 2 more countries to ratify, the agreement enters into force. It goes to the African Union and it becomes binding. And the Egyptians can eat coal, or anybody else can eat coal. That's it. The big question, why are we not signing on it? Why are we not supporting our African brothers and sisters in the Lakes region, siding with them and regaining control of our waters? Why are we siding with Sudan and Egypt? It's an embarrassing question. If I were a cabinet minister in our government, I will be very much embarrassed. Where do I belong? With whom should I be cooperating? Where do my interests lie? Building a hotel or building a clinic or giving our boys and girls 300 or 400 or 500 scholarships. I do not turn around and sell my water for that. So that's the starting point. I have two very gallant women who are working with me now, and probably they will be listening to us, who are trying to see where are the documents. The appeal, the submission by the Ministry of Water Resources and Irrigation to sign on the CFA was tendered back in 2011, 2013, 10 years back. It was passed through the Council of Ministers, and then it was sent to the upper house, to the Council of States. It is still there. 10 minutes later, it is still there. And now we're trying to find it. Where is it? Who is hiding it? Who is keeping it? And we want it to come to the surface, and we want the House of States to sign on it, take it to the Parliament, take it to the President to sign on it, and we want to be part of the Cooperative Framework Agreement. We don't want to be bullied into not signing on it. What is going to happen? Nobody is going to bring their forces because we signed on an agreement and we exercised our rights. This is really a major point in that protection. The other thing I would do to protect, I will shut down all the 10 offices of a foreign country, a foreign ministry who are there in my country. And let me tell you an incident. Let our listeners listen well. One time, our national security in Juba were patrolling the Nile in Juba, close to where there is a barge, there is a tugboat that has sunk down. You can see it if you are there. So they found a group of, it was 4 o'clock in the morning, 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning. So they found a group of Egyptians patrolling that place, going up and down. So they stopped them. What are you doing here? And the Egyptians said, we are fishing. 3 o'clock in the morning. Why do you go fishing 3 o'clock in the morning? We need to be extremely careful. And there is a document that I can share with you. It was signed twice. The second time it was signed and it was a sellout. When I shared it with a senior official in the United Nations and I said this was a sellout, he said, no, this was high treason. So we need to be extremely careful in reading the documents that we sign on. And if you are dealing with a sensitive issue like the water of the Nile, this is eternal. The Nile is not going to go anywhere. And I always look at the Aral and I always look at Lake Chad. What the Sud could dry out. Lake Victoria is expected to dry out within the next 500 years. The largest water reservoir in the world is expected to dry out. We have got to wake up. We have got to, the fact that there is water all over the place now does not mean that in 10 years the same water will be in the same places. So we have got to keep what we have. The second thing that I proposed to the president, and he accepted it, but it has not been implemented, is not to have a high level water committee, to have a commission. The commission is independent. The commission had the sense of protection, and the commission is to be commissioned by the president, so he's there on top so that nobody tampers with it. And I repeat this appeal. We would like to have a water commission, probably headed by the president for the first 2 or 3 years, so that all the child play can actually be stopped. If the government needs help in how to establish the commission, I am volunteering at no cost to do that. And there are donors who are willing to support it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof, for those powerful call to the government of South Sudan. It is true indeed our nation need to retreat back to its house and look at the East Africa region. These people from East Africa, they don't have more interest to disadvantage any country along the Nile. But the other side of the north, there are those countries who are so much into disadvantage others due to their high technology and the economy wide too. That is why they're almost and always into the issue of Nile water. And there is no another country that Egypt always pressed so hard than South Sudan. And there are numerous countries along the Nile, so which means there is loophole that Egypt always sees in South Sudan, that if he insists, then South Sudan will be easily manipulated and accept the deal, simply because they treat us like a children or like a child who does not know where he or she is going. Thank you so much for those calls, Prof. You really, you are son of the soil and you are son of that country. The issues that you are advocating for and the issues that you are articulating for with the relevance and fresh examples can convince anybody to see that this person is for your good, not for his personal interest. You are actually advocating for the society and the generation to come, for that country and for South Sudan to exist forever and ever until maybe the end of the world. Yes, I'm rightly informed that there is one question from Clubhouse. One member here or South Sudanese on that side want to pose that question. We will allow that one question to get in, and then we will wrap it up with our last questions on our podium before we end our show. Thank you so much, Abraham Adit. You can connect Professor with the Clubhouse audience. Thank you.
Thank you, Majok. So we have one question coming from Kalaman. Kalaman, if you can hear my voice, you can open your mic and ask your question to Professor.
Thank you so much, Madrid. Thank you so much, Professor. I believe you'll be the right person for me to ask. You see, just let me make it a little bit. You see, in our dark days, we as South Sudanese, we used to have like influence, at least in the World Bank, because we used to have like 2 vice presidents, but now today we don't have none. And then Egyptian, they got a lot of influence in the World Bank. And then I am surprised, and then I read wondering, there is a lot of projects from the World Bank dealing with this Nile, and then even like dams, all about about South Sudan. So I'm wondering why the World Bank is much concerned about all those projects. It is influence from Egypt, or there is something behind that. So thank you so much, because you're well aware, and then you used to work with the World Bank. You might be aware about that. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Carmen. Yeah, go ahead, Professor.
Right. I will expand my reply to the question a little bit. There is funding now. The Dutch, the Kingdom of Holland, have funding the IOM to deal with floods in Boer area. And the World Bank is now talking about allocating $200 million for general capacity building of South Sudan. It is still at an early stage. These organizations, they do not just throw their money on the floor. They want to see an output at the end of the day, an outcome to start, and then an output, an impact on the lives of people. The World Bank and others are careful, and I'm not speaking on their behalf. I am expressing my own views. With whom do they work? With which ministry? What is the local capacity that is there? If I were the World Bank, or if I was the USAID, or any other organization, if I were JICA, I will not throw my money where the projects cannot be sustained. You can have a water plant, you can have a fishery, you can have a road. There was a road in Equatoria and it got washed away. It was very badly built. Look at the deep bores and boreholes. Most of them are non-functional. Even the Karjaka is not working. So when you want to do sustainable development, development that lasts, you need to look at all those bolts and nuts. If I drill a well to give water, I need to make sure that it continues to give water from now until eternity, because people will need the water, and the people are going to come, and the young men and women are going to come to take the water every morning, 365 days per year. So it has to be operational all the time. So this takes me to the issue of capacity. It takes me to the issue of playing our role. Uh, International development is not about travel. I counted one undersecretary who traveled out of the country 4 times in 1 month. How does he run his ministry? If you if you travel out 4 times in 1 month, and we have got what we call line management. I mean, it is the minister, what he says is final, the undersecretary, what he says is final, and so on. That's what we call vertical management. So we have got to build our own capacity to deal with those funds. Otherwise, the people will not give us the funds. And if they give us 10% of it and it is not well managed, they will not give us the 90%. The second thing is what I said earlier about homegrown solutions. People say there is no money. There is money. 120,000 barrels per day are being pumped out every day as we speak. That's money, and we are only 11 million people. So where is our share? Where is our part? Where is this money going? I was really saddened by giving away the government money and giving it in the name of individuals. If I am a president and I give $1 million, it is not me giving the $1 million. It is the people giving the $1 million. So we have got to manage the money that we have. If we manage that money well, put it through a system, checks and balances, make sure that there are no loopholes, there is no corruption, then the 120 million barrels per day is quite a bit of return, and it can actually help us. However, as I said earlier, I read that there is probably $200 million from the World Bank. There was $24 or $26 million for the Ministry of Water Resources. The government of Holland, they are very good people. They have stood with us all the time. They are very enthusiastic. They are differentiating between the government and the people. And other countries might be doing that, but the Dutch are very good in that area. I am helping them out now. We are working on an Institute of Water Studies at the University of Juba, kind of world-class, a body of excellence in water studies at the University of Juba. We are already working on that, and we hope to complete it so that we house knowledge within South Sudan rather than people like myself jumping in and out, myself and others. That's a serious project. I am the consultant helping the University of Juba on that. Funding is available for it. So there are good glimpses of hope, but my concluding remark is we need to do our job first. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor, for that And thank you, Kalman, from Clubhouse and all listeners in Clubhouse. Thank you so much. I always appreciate you, South Sudanese in Clubhouse. You don't take any South Sudan issue lightly. You always come in a good number, listen and share your opinions. And that is where we can learn from each other. Conversation make us gain knowledge. Thank you for that. Professor, you mentioned many things in regard to how our government, especially government of South Sudan, should handle this issue of Nile water. And Egypt is not sleeping. And this brings me to the last questions of our today's conversation. Do you believe, Professor, that the Egyptian manipulation is still ongoing in South Sudan? Or do you believe the government of South Sudan has now seen a beam of light and they will try so much to rectify those mistakes which were done during the struggle and even the post-independent violence in our country? And this thing also includes the establishment of Ministry of Water, the Egyptian Ministry of Water in South Sudan, and also the presence of Egyptian agencies across 10 states being attached to the Ministry of Water. Is it true that Egypt is controlling the South Sudan government when it comes to water? And if that is the case, Prof, then how do you see the future of Nile water in the hand of South Sudan? Thank you.
If you were not as young as you are, and if we were born around the turn of the century, early 10s, early 20s, 1910, 1920, just south of Malakal, there was a town called Tawfiqiya, a whole town called Tawfiqiya. It was called Tawfiqiya because the Khedive, the ruler of Egypt, was named Tawfiq. So the Egyptians had a town in South Sudan, equatorial South Sudan, south of Malakal, with the name of the Khedive, the ruler of Egypt. That was not all. South of that place, there was a forest, one of our forests, South Sudan forest. The forest was called Tawfiqiya Forest. I'm just taking you back to the historical narrative of that. And then I will take you to the I will skip other agreements, but I will take you to the 1959 agreement, which divided the entire discharge of the Nile of 85 billion cubic meters of water per year between two countries, Egypt and Sudan. 55.5 billion for Egypt and 18.5 billion for Sudan. That's not all. I am not done. And to add insult to injury, the agreement, and it's available in the website, the agreement says if somehow the efforts of the two countries succeed in increasing the discharge of the Nile, the additional water will be divided equally between the two countries. So the injury was you Nile and lakes countries, you have no right over the water. But not only that, that's fine, I can swallow that. It was colonization. But even in the future, if the discharge of the Nile is increased, you have no right to it. It comes to us. One of my students said, history and archaeology are the umbilical cord linking the present to the past. We have got to understand our history. We have got to understand where our history is coming from. And we have got to have lessons learned from our history. Let me take you to the CPA. The CPA is 261 pages. 101 of them are the implementation matrix. how to implement the agreement. And that was the brilliant part about it. I was part of the team who did the implementation matrix. When we were working on that, if you read the agreement, there isn't a single word about the Nile waters. So I asked Dr. John and I said, you know, this is a black hole. There is a big gap there. And he said, leave it alone. We don't want to upset the Egyptians at this time. So with his leadership vision, he wanted to keep the Egyptians at bay, and he refused that the Egyptians actually become part of the team. And the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Norway, Hilda Johnson, if a statue or statues are to be put in Juba next to those of Dr. John Garang, the first statue will go to Martin Maniel, who is one of our heroes, and people don't talk about him a lot, a great man. The second statue should go to Hilda Johnson. Without Hilda Johnson, the CPA would not have been signed the way it has been signed. So she had to go along. She had oversight of us, but she had to go along with the directives of the CNC, of the commander-in-chief. So the CPA doesn't have a single word about the Nile waters. We need to see where are the gaps there and see what we can do about it. Another addition that I would like to share with you, there is what we call the Nile gauges. Bor used to have one, Mongala had the major one, Nimuli had one. Now the Egyptians have re-erected the Nile gauges under their supervision and control. So this has got nothing much to do with direct security, but there is the indirect security. If I have a gauge, what did I put on it? Did I put a camera? And if I am managing it, they are managing all the gauges, not the South Sudanese, not the ministry. Egypt has reinstalled the Nile gauges and they are managing them. What are they doing besides managing them? Why is the government of South Sudan allowing that? So we need to be careful about the presence of Egypt, not only Egypt, any other country. We have got to keep people to their limits. An ambassador is an envoy of his country. He should respect the host country. He should abide by the rules and regulations, and he should not overstep the mandate upon which his papers were accepted. Let me take you to why Egypt is panicking now. When the 1959 agreement was signed, Egypt was only 30 million people. Today they are 5 million people. Since 1964, when the high dam became operational, Sudan never used their full share of 18.5 billion. They never used more than 6 billion cubic meters. They never used more than 12. So 6 billion cubic meters of water, the share of Sudan, were going free of charge since 1964 into Egypt. Now the Ethiopians are building the GERD, the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, with a lake capacity, with a reservoir capacity of 74 billion cubic meters. They don't need all that capacity. They were just careful about it, and they decided to have a large capacity. So Sudan could agree with Egypt to store the additional 6 billion cubic meters for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, depending on the politics. So what President Sisi did, he went for desalination plants, and they discovered that all the money that they spent, I think it was $18 billion. It did not, it was a drop in an ocean. It was less than 1% of their need, and most of them are drying out now. That's where the panic is coming from. They are going back to the old colonial source, wanting to siphon out 4.8 billion cubic meters of water from the waters of the Sud, which is waters of South Sudan. Let me tell you why they are targeting Bahr al-Ghazal Basin. There are 8 or 9 tributaries to Bahr al-Ghazal Basin. Ni'am is the last one, but then you have Siu, Busari, Kir, and others. There are 8 or 9 of them. All of them originate in South Sudan. They run in South Sudan. They dissipate in the Sud, which is in South Sudan. So this is our water. Nobody can claim anything to it. Not the democratic government of the Democratic Congo, not Uganda, nobody. This is our water as if it is a well. Nobody has any rights to it. That's why they want to drain Bahr al-Ghazal Basin. So we have to be extremely careful. And our brothers and sisters in Unity State, they have got to be very careful and have a wider look rather than a smaller look. If I were the government of South Sudan, I will not accept the peanuts that Egypt is putting on the table. Building a clinic, giving 10, 15, or 100 or 200 scholarships to students, building a 4-star hotel. Why do I need a 4-star hotel in Juba? There is no reason. There are already 4-star hotels in Juba. So we should not sell ourselves cheap to anyone, Egypt or no Egypt. And we should not sell any element of our national security. And water is at the center of our national security. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you so much, Prof, for taking us back and reawakening our memories, especially for those who were born before me, and also for those who were born during the struggle, to know that the Egyptian presence in the territory of South Sudan was not just at the recent past. It has been there for the long period of time, since the time of colonization. And it will be so hard, Prof, to deal with these people, because if someone has been in your territory for more than a century, this person begin to think that he or she is part of that place, and she can begin to behave like the owner of the land and also decide the fate of that piece of land. And I think that's what Egyptians are doing. You gave a very good example of Egyptian patrolling around the Nile in the morning, at night. And when they were asked, they said they were fishing. Why do you fish at night in somebody's house? So there must be something which the government of South Sudan and which citizens of South Sudan are not even seeing. But Egypt is already there. Thank you so much, Prof. Up to this juncture, I'll give you 2 minutes to give us your last remark and your last message to the people of South Sudan, to the government of South Sudan, and to the citizens themselves. Thereafter, we will end our show, Prof. And thank you so much for your time.
If you would allow me to direct my last word to His Excellency the President in the form of an appeal. And I hope that either he or my daughter Lily Martin Maniel, who is his press secretary, I wish if she could attention and bring this whole show to his attention, that he needs to stop any activities and stop firmly any activities in the waterways of South Sudan until credible evidence-based feasibility studies are done. And I urge His Excellency to form a commission for the Nile waters of South Sudan. If he needs help, I am volunteering to help him. Thank you very much. God bless you. God bless South Sudan. God bless the people of South Sudan.
Wow. Thank you so much, Professor. We, on behalf of Lagos State Media, the whole team, we wholeheartedly appreciate your time. And we ask God to give you more health, energy, so that you continue doing more research, because to do more research and scientific analysis needs you to have energy. And we understand with your willingness, we believe God will always give you good health and guide you so that you can also continue sharing your wisdom, knowledge, history, and experience with the young water engineers from South Sudan, from Africa, from other part of the world, from Asia. And through that, that is the only wish that we can ask from God. After this juncture, we also appreciate our viewers for joining us and listen to our guests. And we also ask you to share this live show, to go wide and maybe at least to reach to our government official and listen to the call from the professor Taj Elkhazin. May God bless you, Professor, and we wish to be in touch with you, at least to gain more knowledge from you as a young nation and as young people. Elders are the pot of wisdom and the pot of history, because most of our history were not written, and some of you have them in mind and have them in hard copies, both soft and hard copy. May God be with you. May God bless people of South Sudan. May God bless our country, and may God guide our President Salva Kiir Mayardit to always do rightful decision that will benefit the current generation of our country and that benefit the next generation of South Sudan and make South Sudan a great nation among the world committees of the nation. Thank you so much. May God bless each and every one of you. May God bless South Sudan, and may God bless Africa. Thank you, Prof.
It's your boy Young Love, I give him that thing. Pancho leg stand and punch America. Banyi doll, Pancho leg stand and punch America. Banyi doll, walk on your leg, Kankara water no watching. Oga level leg, gear, power, leg. Panda with ya, punch America. Panya doll, Chingatonga Pandon could you buy a check out. Papu Panda Jiro, what ya be doll venting. Stand up and cheer America, Banji Dwell, Pancha leg stand up and cheer America, Banji Dwell, walk on your leg, Kankara water watching, Oga level leg, gear, power, leg, Panda with ya, Panchi America, Panya Dwell, Chingatonga Pandon, could you buy a check out, Panda Gear, what ya be, Dwell venting.